Hey guys, tonight we venture into a world of thick fur, cloaks, biting winds, and the strange comfort of sleeping next to livestock. You're about to step into the frozen nights of the Viking Age, where winters weren't just cold, they were legendary. Imagine this: snow crunching underfoot, a smoky longhouse in the distance, and a sky so dark it feels like the stars are watching you. Your nose is already numb, and you haven't even made it to dinner. Here's the reality check. Without modern heating, Wi-Fi, or fleece pajamas, you probably wouldn't last the night. But that's okay, because we're here to travel through history with a full belly and a warm blanket. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Oh, and drop a comment telling me your location and what time you're listening. I love knowing where in the world you're relaxing right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step out of a creaking wooden door just after dusk. The snow beneath your worn leather boots crunches like broken glass. Every breath is visible, a little puff of cloud slipping past your beard, or scarf, if you're lucky. It's winter in the Viking North, and when the sun sets at 3 p.m. and won't rise properly for months, you don't chase warmth. You build it. First things first, fire. Without a strong hearth, your bones will go stiff before midnight. You trudge across the icy ground, carrying armfuls of dry wood, precious stuff, especially after a storm. Most of your day was spent chopping, splitting, and hoarding fuel. There's no central heating here. The fire in the longhouse must be fed constantly, or you'll wake up as a Viking sickle. Inside the house, it's dim and smoky. A central fire pit glows, the flames licking a pot of stew that smells faintly of onions, salt, and something that might once have been a fish. The walls are wattle and daub, basically woven twigs covered in clay, and they're packed with moss for insulation. It helps, sort of. You duck under the low rafters, careful not to knock over one of the hanging bundles of dried herbs and animal fat. You're wrapped in a heavy wool tunic, a fur-lined cloak, and thick trousers, all layered like a medieval onion. Underneath, linen underwear that's scratchy but breathable. Above all that, your boots are stuffed with hay and wrapped in leather. Not comfortable, but better than frostbite. Historians say Viking footwear was shockingly effective for the era. Primitive, yes, but smart. Animal hide soles, wool stuffing, and a lot of trial and error. The thing is, the cold doesn't just bite, it seeps. Into your fingers, into your toes, into your soul, and once it's in, it stays. That's why layering is life. That and huddling close. You plop down near the hearth, pressed shoulder to shoulder with family, neighbours, a sleepy dog, and possibly a random traveller who just needed a place to crash. In this world, personal space is a myth, but honestly, body heat is better than privacy. Above you, the rafters creak. Wind whistles through the tiniest cracks in the walls. Somewhere a draft sneaks in and brushes your ankle like a ghost. You shift closer to the fire. The smoke stings your eyes, but you don't complain. Smoke means warmth. It also helps keep bugs away, which is a bonus because bathing isn't exactly frequent this time of year. You sip something warm, probably thin ale, maybe weak mead. Fermentation was a Viking winter gift. Even kids drank it because boiled water was boring and possibly deadly. The ale's barely alcoholic, more like slightly fizzy bread water. Still, it helps dull the cold, just a bit. Here's a strange fact. Some evidence suggests Viking families sometimes burned dried animal dung when firewood ran low. The smell? Let's not go there. But it worked. A warm longhouse was a successful longhouse, even if it smelled like the back end of a yak. As you settle in for the night, you curl around your cloak and cloak around your knees. Sleep doesn't come easy in the cold. Your nose is an icicle. Your toes feel like rocks. Your back is sore from sitting on a wooden bench all day, carving spoons or mending netting. And there's always the sound of someone snoring, loudly. Probably your uncle, maybe the goat. Historians still argue whether Vikings had dedicated beds or just communal straw piles with some wooden framing. What we do know is that bedding was precious, often passed down, even inherited. Sometimes the households lined their sleep spaces with moss or hay. Others used animal skins so thick they could double as armour. You pull your cloak tighter and shut your eyes. The fire pops, echoing like distant hoofbeats. You imagine waking up at dawn, if dawn ever arrives, and starting the whole process over, feeding the fire, fetching water through frozen wells, and stretching your legs in the snow just long enough to remember why you don't live outside. And as your breathing slows and the cold fades slightly, you realize something. Vikings didn't just survive winter. They endured it with grit, warmth, and stubbornness. The night is long, but the hearth still burns. You wake to the sound of someone coughing beside you and the faint rustle of straw as another body shifts in the dark. The fire has burned low, and the air inside the longhouse has taken on a heavy, damp chill. You blink through the smoky haze and remember where you are, not in a cozy bedroom with central heating, but in a Viking longhouse, where survival is a group project. The longhouse is more than a home. It's a lifeboat in a sea of snow and darkness. And tonight you're packed in with a few dozen others, some snoring, some stirring, all bundled in cloaks and furs like human burritos. The ceiling is low, the air thick with the smell of wood smoke, sweat, and something faintly goat-like, possibly because there's a goat. You can just make out the rough timber beams above you, blackened from years of smoke curling up from the central hearth. No chimney here, just a hole in the roof, and sometimes even that's covered during blizzards. It's not ideal, but it's warmer than outside, and you don't complain. Much. There are no bedrooms, of course. The longhouse is one big shared space. Cooking, sleeping, eating, even crafting all happen in this one long, narrow room. On either side of the central aisle, raised wooden platforms stretch from wall to wall, covered in straw, animal skins and furs. That's your bed. It's also someone else's table, seat and footrest. Multitasking furniture, Viking style. The fire pit down the middle does its best. It glows gently now, embers pulsing like the heartbeat of the house. Someone throws on another log, and the smoke thickens before drifting lazily toward the roof hole. It never really escapes, though. The smoke hangs low, clinging to your clothes and hair until you smell like a campfire permanently. But hey, it keeps the bugs down, and that's worth something. You stretch carefully so you don't elbow the person next to you. Might be your cousin. Might be someone's cousin. Hard to tell in the half-light. You step over a sleeping dog and nearly trip on a wooden bowl left from the night before. Somewhere in the shadows a baby cries. Someone else mutters in their sleep, swearing in Old Norse. You pull your cloak tighter and settle back onto the bench. Living this close to others has its benefits and curses. You share warmth, sure, but also every cough, sneeze, and snore. Personal hygiene isn't stellar, especially in winter. Bathing means breaking through ice and jumping in a stream, so you make do. Lots of smoke, herbal rinses, and the occasional brushing of teeth with charcoal and twigs. Minty fresh? Not quite, but your breath could probably scare off a bear. Here's the quirky bit. Some Viking families brought livestock inside during the coldest months, not just for meat or milk, but for body heat. A couple of sheep or a small cow could raise the temperature in the room. Of course, they also pooped in the corner and sometimes chewed on your shoes. But again, priorities. You find your wooden cup and scoop some warm broth from the pot still simmering by the fire. It's mostly water, turnips, and maybe a scrap of meat if you're lucky. Protein is precious in the depths of winter. Most of the good stuff was salted and stored months ago. Fish dried in the wind, meat buried in pits lined with stone, jars of fermented cabbage that smell worse than they taste. As you sip, someone wakes up and starts mumbling about frost spirits. Superstitions run thick in these nights. Everyone's heard stories of spirits slipping in through the smoke hole to steal warmth, or worse. Historians still argue whether those tales were born from genuine belief or just attempts to keep kids from wandering out into snowstorms. Either way, they work. You can't help but chuckle as a half-asleep uncle throws a fur over his head and mutters something about trolls nibbling his toes. You decide it's safer to keep yours under the blanket. Longhouse life is noisy, cramped, and let's be honest, kind of smelly, but it's also deeply human. You share stories while mending clothes. You laugh when someone spills ale on their beard. You listen to the old ones mutter tales of warriors who never felt cold because they were too stubborn or too drunk to notice. And you learn to sleep with one eye open, one ear half listening for danger, and both feet jammed under someone else's cloak for warmth. Tonight, like every night, you survive together, with fire, fur, and family, even if the goat snores louder than your cousin. The longhouse is still half asleep when you rise, teeth chattering and nose stinging with the kind of cold that feels personal. Someone's already up and stoking the fire with slow, practiced movements, coaxing orange embers back into flame. It's your turn to help with breakfast, or more accurately, to chisel food out of its frozen hiding place. You duck through the low doorway and brace yourself. The outside air slams into you like a slap from Thor himself. Your breath steams in the blue morning chill, and the snow crunches beneath your feet like shards of brittle pottery. It's quiet, except for the occasional creak of a frozen tree and the soft grunt of livestock shifting in their pen. Breakfast, if you can call it that, starts in the food cellar, a stone-lined pit partially buried in the earth. You tug open the wooden lid and climb down, the cold hitting you all over again, but somehow in a different, deeper way. Down here it's like time is frozen too. You dig through baskets of root vegetables, turnips, carrots, a few wrinkled apples. Then you find the real prize, slabs of dried cod, hard as planks and sharp at the edges, but loaded with protein and salt. Perfect Viking fuel. You sling a few over your shoulder and haul them back up into the light. Back in the longhouse, someone's boiling water with dried herbs. Another stirs porridge thick enough to stop a spear. You sit by the fire, gnawing on fish like it owes you money, and wash it down with weak ale. Again. It's warm, at least. Kind of. Maybe. Historians note that winter meals often lacked variety. You ate what you could preserve: smoked meats, dried legumes, pickled cabbage, sour milk. If you were lucky, someone had hidden away a wedge of hard cheese. If you were really lucky, that cheese didn't have hair on it. But here's a quirky twist. The Vikings also fermented fish in barrels, lutefisk, turning it into sars, something closer to fish jelly. It was an acquired taste. You take one bite and wonder how anyone survived the smell alone. Some argue it was invented as a food of necessity. Others suspect it may have just been a weird flex. And yet somehow it kept people alive. Calories mattered, salt mattered. Fermentation, while gross to modern palates, was a miracle of survival science. It kept protein from rotting and added flavour. Sort of. The more pungent the better, apparently. If your stew didn't try to bite you back, was it even Viking food? You help yourself to a bowl of hot porridge, stirring in crushed hazelnuts and dried berries. That part's actually not bad. They foraged heavily in the summer and dried everything they could find. Berries, mushrooms, wild herbs. They were winter's only nod to taste. Someone mentions the winter feast of Jol, the ancient Norse celebration that predated Christmas. You vaguely remember the last one. A whole boar roasted over the fire, everyone crammed elbow to elbow, singing, drinking, trading stories. The cold outside forgotten for a night. Jol wasn't just about indulgence, it was about defiance. A middle finger to the longest, darkest days of the year. You can practically hear the drums still echoing in your memory, see the flicker of fire on painted shields, smell the roasting meat that only came once a year. Historians still argue whether Viking feasts had ritual elements or were just very enthusiastic potlucks. Either way, it was warmth, emotional and physical, and it carried you through. After eating, your chores resume. You grab a chipped axe and head back outside, cracking ice off the water barrel. Each task is a small rebellion against the cold. Water, firewood, food, it all needs constant tending. If you fall behind even for a day, the consequences are real. As you carry another load of kindling into the longhouse, you glance at the pile of firewood by the wall. It's shrinking. Too fast. Winter has a way of exposing bad planning, or worse, an early thaw followed by more snow which ruins stored wood. That's happened before, and it's never funny, except in hindsight. Sort of. Back inside, you wipe your hands on your cloak and sit down to repair a cracked wooden bowl. The long nights leave plenty of time for mending, crafting and quiet conversation. Someone's carving runes into a bit of driftwood. Someone else is sewing a tear in a fur cloak. The fire cracks, warm and loud. You wonder, not for the first time, how much colder it's going to get. You reach for another chunk of fish, mouth dry, and mutter a silent thanks. Not to a god, but to whoever thought, yeah, let's salt this fish and leave it hanging for a year. That'll be edible later. And weirdly, they were right. You blink against the sunless grey light that filters through the roof gap, barely brighter than twilight. Even in daytime, the air inside the longhouse is heavy, thick with smoke, damp wool, and the faint but unmistakable scent of wet dog. It's been days since you bathed, weeks maybe, but you're about to fix that. Kind of. It starts with a plunge into a frozen stream, because apparently the gods enjoy watching people suffer. You grit your teeth, pull off your cloak and prepare yourself. The icy wind kisses every patch of exposed skin like a slap. Two men nearby count you down in Old Norse. You curse them under your breath, then sprint barefoot across the snow and dive into the dark water. It hits you like a punch to the soul. You gasp, flail, nearly forget which way is up. Your brain stops working. Your skin screams. Somewhere your ancestors applaud. A few seconds later, you scramble out, skin steaming in the cold air, and run straight into the waiting warmth of the bastu, the Viking sauna. It's a small wooden hut, not much to look at, but inside it's a whole different world. You close the door behind you and are immediately swallowed by hot, damp air and the scent of burning birch and herbs. Glorious. Steam rises from the rocks in the corner, sizzling under splashes of water. You take your place on the wooden bench and breathe in deep. Now this is Viking luxury. The sauna, yes, even the Vikings had them, wasn't just for bathing. It was sacred, it was medicinal, it was gossip central. Sweat carried away sickness, and the steam did what winter never could. It warmed your bones. You scrub yourself with a bundle of twigs, maybe birch or juniper. It's rough, but effective. Dirt, oil and regrets all flake away. Here's a wild detail. Some Viking soap may have been made from animal fat and wood ash, and occasionally fermented urine. Yep, urine, high in ammonia, surpra. Icingly great at breaking down grime. Whether you try it or not is between you and your nostrils. You laugh through a cloud of steam as someone cracks a joke about your heroic leap into the river. Outside, the world is frost and wind and suffering. In here, it's warmth and laughter. Temporary paradise. You emerge red-faced, cleanish, and steaming like a cooked lobster. You feel alive, awake, slightly tingly. You wrap yourself in furs and stomp back through the snow, feeling like a god. Until you slip on a patch of ice and land face first in a drift. Classic. Back at the Longhouse, you dry your hair by the fire, rubbing it with a stiff cloth. Cleanliness isn't just about comfort, it's about health. Disease spreads easily when 30 people are packed into a smoky box with zero ventilation and one communal stew pot. Historians have found combs, tweezers, ear-picks and razors in Viking graves, proof that they weren't the filthy savages popular culture makes them out to be. In fact, they were pretty meticulous, especially by early medieval standards. Grooming mattered, beards were oiled and braided, hair was trimmed, lice, constant battle. You find your comb, carved from bone, with tiny tight teeth and rake it through your tangled hair. It pulls, yes, but it also catches things. Best not to examine too closely. Nearby, someone plucks at a lute-like instrument and hums an old folk song. You tap your foot, half listening, half dozing. Clean, warm and fed. Well, mostly, you're about as comfortable as a Viking gets in the dead of winter. Someone brings out a mirror. Not glass, of course, but polished metal. You peer into it, squinting. Your beard's wild. Your face is wind-chapped. Your expression says, "I haven't seen the sun in 2 months." You look like every Viking ever carved into a runestone. That is to say, surprisingly dignified, if a little frosty. Here's something historians still argue about. Did Vikings bathe more than other medieval people? Many think yes. Even their enemies admitted they were unusually clean and well-groomed. There are even Anglo-Saxon complaints about Viking men stealing our women with their weekly baths. Apparently soap and a comb were dangerous weapons. You sit back, sigh, and stretch your legs toward the fire. The day's almost gone. The sun never rose properly, just smeared some grey across the sky before slinking off again. Tomorrow you'll have to chop more wood, patch that leaking roof, F-panel, and maybe convince the goat to stop chewing on your boots. But for now, you've conquered the river, you've steamed the cold from your bones, you've deloused your eyebrows. It's a good day. The Longhouse fills again with sleepy murmurs and firelight. Somewhere, someone breaks into a quiet version of an old saga tune. You hum along, knowing the words by heart. You've earned your warmth tonight, not just by surviving, but by embracing the rituals that keep the frost at bay. Just try not to think about the urine soap. Night falls again, slowly and silently, the same way it always does in the Viking winter, like a thick wool blanket laid across the land. You sit by the fire, legs tucked up under your cloak, gnawing on the same dried fish you had at breakfast. It's chewier this time, or maybe your teeth are just tired. Across the Longhouse, someone sneezes, someone else coughs. It's the symphony of winter survival. But what's truly warming your back isn't just fire, it's the soft, wheezing breath of an extremely cozy sheep. Yes, a sheep. You're not cuddling it exactly, you're just using it strategically, a kind of walking, bleating radiator. In a time before insulation, heated floors or electric blankets, animals weren't just food, they were heat sources. It's hard to feel fancy when your bedmate might also be tomorrow's dinner, but you've made peace with that. The longhouse isn't just shared by people. In the deepest cold, animals come inside too. Chickens roost in corners, pigs snuffle under the sleeping benches, goats wander in and out like they own the place, and honestly, they kind of do. You'd be amazed how much heat a cow gives off. The body temperature of a large animal in a confined space, that's prime Viking engineering. It's like living inside a slow-moving furnace that moos occasionally and eats your firewood. You shift your leg as the sheep leans in closer, her fleece brushing against your side. She smells like damp wool and hay, but at this point, so do you. It might sound strange, but these animals are more than livestock. They're part of the household. Kids give them names. Old folks talk to them. They've saved lives during particularly brutal winters just by existing. And unlike some people you live with, they don't snore. Mostly. Tonight the wind is howling. It creeps under the door and sneaks through gaps in the daubed walls trying to steal your warmth. You pull your fur tighter and shift even closer to the sheep, who is now fully asleep and softly drooling on the floor, a small price to pay. The fire crackles. A dog dreams nearby, feet twitching as it chases something in its sleep. Maybe a squirrel, maybe a frost spirit. Someone snores like a dying bear. Someone else mumbles in Old Norse, their voice drifting between dream and legend. Historians still argue whether Vikings routinely kept animals inside all winter or only during the worst storms, but the archaeological evidence is clear. Many longhouses were built with attached stalls or pen spaces at one end, cow on one side, people on the other, warmth leaking slowly across. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't ideal, but when the temperature dropped low enough to freeze your ale solid, the definition of ideal changed quickly. You remember stories of the snow hunger winters, the ones where supplies ran out early and people got creative. Roasted bark, boiled leather. You once heard about a village where they made stew out of antlers. No one's quite sure if that was a joke. You hope it was. The sheep stirs, you scratch her head. She grunts, shifts, and settles again. You're officially her favourite human furnace. There's something peaceful about it, in a weird way. This living quilt of family, friends, animals, and occasional rodents. Everyone packed in, breathing the same smoky air, dreaming different dreams. You've built a strange little ark in the middle of a frozen ocean. Someone tosses a log onto the fire. Sparks leap into the dark like tiny, frantic spirits. You blink slowly, eyelids heavy, the day's exhaustion creeping over you like snow drifting onto a roof. You think back to summer, when everything was green, when rivers sang, when the sun didn't set until midnight. It feels like another world, a place with colours. Right now, the whole earth feels grey and brown and white, but somehow, even in this monochrome world, life pulses on. You reach for your carved wooden cup and take a final sip of weak ale, warmish, flat, perfect. A child giggles in their sleep. The dog lets out a soft, suspicious fart and pretends it wasn't him. You roll your eyes. Quirky fact. Viking dogs were valued enough to be buried beside their owners, sometimes with full grave goods. That might seem excessive, until you realise that this flatulent beast just saved your toes from freezing off by lying on them all night. You lie back on your shared sleeping bench, the sheep pressed against one side of you and a cousin snoring on the other. You're stiff, sore, and definitely going to wake up with someone's elbow in your ribs. But you're warm, and that means everything. Out there, beyond the walls, the wind can rage and the frost can bite. But in here, you've made a bubble of survival. No central heating, no blankets fresh from the dryer, just fur, fire, and friendship, plus a little help from your favourite sheep. You wake up with a chicken on your chest. Not metaphorically, an actual chicken. She's roosted there sometime during the night, warm and oblivious, tucked up like you're just another part of the furniture. You squint at her. She blinks back. There's a moment of mutual judgment before she hops off with a dignified squawk and struts across the straw. This, you think, is winter in the Viking world. Not heroic raids, not roaring longboats or gleaming axes. Just you, a damp tunic and poultry-based alarm clocks. The sky outside is still stubbornly dark, though it's likely late morning. You've lost track of time. Everyone has. Winter days blur into one long twilight. Some last just 4 hours of sunlight, barely enough to finish your chores before darkness swallows everything again. And when the sun doesn't rise for days at a time, that's when things start to feel strange. You stretch, shuffle over to the fire and join the others in a slow-motion ritual of waking up. Someone is grinding dried herbs. Someone else pokes at a block of ice that used to be stew. Conversation is minimal, just tired grunts and the occasional complaint about frostbitten toes or someone hogging the good blanket, which, let's be honest, is probably just a cloak that doesn't smell like goat pee. But once the morning routines are out of the way and the fire's burning strong, the mood shifts. It's time to fight the most dangerous enemy of all: boredom. Viking winters weren't just physically cold. They were emotionally long. With little daylight and nowhere to go, people needed something to do besides slowly going mad. And so you entertain yourselves the best way you can, through stories, games, and probably just a little bit of witchcraft. Someone pulls out a bag of carved knuckle bones, dice, in a way. They're used for simple gambling games or sometimes for fortune-telling. You sit in a circle and start rolling, passing the time with lazy competition and jokes that probably haven't changed in 1,000 years. Bet you'll roll a 1 again, like your hunting skills? Careful, or I'll swap your ale with goat milk again. You laugh. You all do. It's a small rebellion against the gloom. Laughter warms better than any fur. Eventually someone starts reciting a saga. Not reading, of course. No one's pulling out a scroll or flipping through a book. This is all oral tradition, memorized lines, flowing rhythms, rich with heroes and monsters and gods who never seem to need to sleep. Tonight's story is one of your favourites, the tale of a warrior who lost his sword to a frost giant and had to win it back by tricking him with riddles and fermented shark. You know it's ridiculous. You also know it's probably true, in the way that all good stories are. The firelight dances on faces as the story unfolds. Some parts make you laugh, others give you chills. Everyone joins in on the familiar verses, like a bedtime chant passed down through centuries. Storytelling wasn't just entertainment, it was history, religion, education, therapy. It reminded you who you were, where you came from, and why your ancestors weren't eaten by wolves. And sometimes the stories got weird. Take the one about the sky wolves who chase the sun and moon, or the tale of the Draugr, undead warriors who rise from frozen graves to terrorize the living. Historians still argue whether Draugr were real beliefs or just really effective bedtime threats. Either way, when a log pops too loud in the fire, you jump just a little. Not that you're scared, of course not, but maybe tonight you'll sleep with your knife a little closer. Someone changes the mood by pulling out a small harp and plucking out a slow, mournful melody. The notes echo around the longhouse, soft and eerie. You close your eyes and let the sound carry you, washing away the snow outside and the ache in your knees. Here's a quirky historical gem. Vikings sometimes played games involving carved walrus ivory pieces shaped like animals, warriors, or strange mythic beasts. Some of them have been found hundreds of miles from where they were carved, proof that even in deep winter, Vikings stayed connected through trade and tales. Tonight, you hold one of those pieces in your hand, a tiny carved horse with swirls along its side. Maybe it's a game piece, maybe a charm, maybe both. You roll it between your fingers and feel the smooth grooves polished by generations of hands. The stories go on. Someone shares a riddle, someone else tries to make shadow puppets on the wall using the firelight and a badly shaped drinking horn. It's a disaster. Everyone laughs again. Outside, the wind moans through the trees. You imagine trolls pacing along the edge of the forest, eyes glowing just out of sight. Another log is tossed on the fire. The flames leap higher, and suddenly everything feels just a little safer again. It's hard to explain, but on nights like this, when you're surrounded by warmth, by voices, by shared memories, you forget the cold. You forget that the sun's abandoned you. You forget that the rivers froze. Zen solid, and the outhouse is a death trap. For a few hours, you're not just surviving, you're living. One story at a time. You're getting dressed again, if you can call it that, though Assembling layers of scratchy survival gear might be more accurate. You pull on a linen undershirt stiff from yesterday's sweat, then a heavy wool tunic, then a second tunic, because why not? It's winter, and you've stopped caring about fashion somewhere between "my toes are numb" and "I think my breath just froze to my moustache." Your trousers are thick wool, itchy and patched, but blessedly warm. You wrap woolen leg bindings, called vindinger, tightly from ankle to knee. These keep snow and wind from creeping up your shins like unwanted guests. Then come the boots, animal hide, loosely stitched, lined with hay and whatever warmth the gods are willing to lend you today. And finally, the cloak. The cloak. A statement piece, really. Heavy wool, pinned at the shoulder with a bronze brooch trimmed in fur that probably once belonged to a wolf, fox, or particularly stylish sheep. It flaps around you like a personal tent and smells like wet campfire. There's a popular myth that Vikings were barbarians who went into battle half-naked, waving axes and ignoring the cold like maniacs. But if you've ever tried fighting or walking during a snowstorm without pants, you know that's absolute nonsense. Vikings layered. They wrapped, they padded, they tied. They dressed smart, not suicidal. You throw a fur hat over your unruly hair and tie it under your chin. It makes you look vaguely like a cross between a bear and a disgruntled mushroom. Perfect. Gloves are next. Real ones, if you're lucky. Mittens, if you're smarter. And some particularly clever folks used a split mitten design so they could grip tools or reins more easily while keeping most of their fingers snug. Historians still argue whether Viking women invented these mittens first or borrowed the idea from the Sami people, who were, and still are, the true term masters. You check your belt, a small knife, a pouch of herbs, a bone comb, because dignity still exists, and a few coins. Probably not enough to buy anything, but they make a nice jangling noise when you walk, which is satisfying. Your outfit now weighs approximately as much as a modest elk. But hey, you're ready for anything. Snowstorms, icy winds, or maybe a surprise invitation to a winter wedding. Which, yes, did happen. Nothing says romance like two people shivering together by candlelight while their families argue about goat dowries. As you step outside, the cold slaps you immediately, but it hits your clothes, not your skin, and that makes all the difference. Your boots crunch through fresh snow, and your cloak whips in the wind. The sky is colourless, just grey on grey, like someone tried to paint a sunrise and gave up halfway. The air smells sharp, like ice and pine and distant smoke. Somewhere nearby, a raven calls. You offer a polite nod. Odin's birds, after all. Best to stay on their good side. You're heading to the storage shed to fetch dried herbs, or maybe to check on the meat rack. Either way, you're grateful for your layers. Without them, your fingers would already be turning the colour of frozen blueberries. Quirky fact. Some Vikings wore squirrel pelts, not just for warmth, but for fashion. Squirrel was soft, abundant, and supposedly a favourite among those who couldn't afford fancier furs like ermine or fox. You can't help but wonder if there was a squirrel tier of social status. Like, were you more respected if your cloak screamed 5 squirrel blend? Someone walks past you in a striking hooded coat, dyed with lichen and madder root, bright reddish orange. You whistle low. Dyes weren't easy to come by in winter, and that's a power move. You're suddenly self-conscious about the hole in your mitten. Back at the Longhouse, kids are pulling on their own mini layers, looking like overstuffed sacks of grain with feet. One has tied a rabbit pelt around his head like a helmet. It works, weirdly. Another one has mittens so oversized she could probably pick up a log without bending her fingers. The clothing is functional, sure, but it also has style. Decorative trim. Intricate tablet-woven bands around cuffs and hems. Even in the frost, even with frozen noses, people still care about how they look. It's human, and it's very, very Viking. Historians believe that textiles were a major form of wealth in Norse society. A single well-made cloak could be worth a small fortune. Spinning, weaving, dyeing, these weren't just chores, they were currency. You don't just survive the cold, you make it look intentional. You finish your chore run, arms full of dried herbs that smell faintly of summer. You stomp your boots against the threshold and duck back into the longhouse, immediately hit by the wave of warmth, smoke, and the soft, familiar stench of communal living. You peel off layers piece by piece. Cloak, mittens, hat, boots, each one dropping to the bench like a knight shedding armour. And in a way, that's exactly what it is. Armour against a silent, frozen enemy that never stops knocking. You sit back by the fire, let the heat kiss your cheeks, and stretch out your wool-wrapped toes. Outside, the wind howls. Inside, you feel safe, soft, a little ridiculous in your squirrel hat, but warm. The wind outside picks up like it's trying to peel the longhouse apart plank by plank. You hear it whistling between the gaps in the roof timbers, rattling the wooden walls, pressing cold fingers through every crevice. Inside, the fire crackles defiantly. You tug your blanket up to your chin and listen. You can hear the wind thinking out there. This, you realize, is what winter does best. It isolates. Even with a dozen people and twice as many animals inside, you feel a strange loneliness creeping in. The dark isn't just around you, it's inside you. And that's when the Vikings did something clever. They told stories, yes, but they also made rituals, things to anchor time, to shape the endless blur of winter into days and weeks, feasts and fasts, beginnings and endings. Without clocks or calendars, they had to invent rhythm in a season that tried to erase it. Tonight, you're helping prepare for one of those rituals, a midwinter blot, a sacrifice, not the Hollywood version with thunder and gore. This one is quieter, stranger, and deeply personal. Someone is preparing a simple altar at the far end of the longhouse, a flat stone set on a wooden frame decorated with pine boughs, carved bones, and dried berries. It's not elaborate, but it hums with significance. You carry over a bowl of warm ale, brewed thick and spiced. Someone else adds a carved wooden idol, short, squat, probably meant to represent Freya or Odin, or maybe a local spirit who handles snowstorms and misplaced mittens. No one explains the rules. Everyone just knows. You light a bundle of herbs and wave it through the smoke of the fire. Someone mutters a prayer. Another hums a low, melodic chant that turns your skin to goose flesh. Historians still argue what exactly went on in Viking religious rites. Some records are Christian and wildly biased. They sacrificed children and danced naked in the snow. Your souls. While archaeological evidence suggests something far more grounded, offerings of food, drink, and hand-carved idols meant to honour forces larger than life. You kneel, pour a splash of ale on the fire. It hisses, then steams upward like a ghost returning home. No one speaks. The silence is sacred. Even the goat behaves. You think of the ancestors, of your grandfather who taught you how to shape a bowstring from twisted gut, of the mother who sang lullabies like they were spells, of people you never met, who lived, froze, survived, who made it through long nights like this one. Suddenly the blot doesn't feel abstract, it feels earned. Then, just as suddenly, it's over. Someone makes a joke to break the mood, probably about the idol looking like his cousin. Laughter rolls through the longhouse like a wave of thaw. Someone pulls out an extra jug of mead. You drink from it and feel the warmth slide down your throat like a promise. Here's a quirky side note. Some Vikings used fungi, especially fly agaric mushrooms, in ritual contexts. Bright red caps with white spots, the same ones you see in fairy tales. Used carefully, they were believed to induce visions. Used less carefully, they induced falling over and waking up with no pants. You pass on that this time. Later, you sit with the oldest man in the village, his beard long enough to tie shoes with, his voice like worn leather. He tells you how, in his youth, he watched a star fall from the sky and land in the fjord, steaming. The gods, he says, testing the ice. You nod, not because you believe him, but because you want to. Faith in the Viking Age wasn't a set of commandments. It was relationship. To the land, to the sea, to the season. Winter didn't just happen to you. You negotiated with it. You offered things. You respected its power. And if you were lucky, it let you see spring. You notice someone hanging charms above the doorway, little woven symbols made from twigs and string. They look like stars or runes, depending on the angle. Protection charms, maybe. Or jay. Just an excuse to decorate. Either way, you smile. It's the Viking version of stringing up Christmas lights and pretending you're not worried about the power bill. The wind outside howls again, but this time it sounds almost distant. The fire is strong, the house is full, the rituals are done. You survived another day, and for tonight, that's enough. Morning again, or what passes for morning in this part of the world where the sky only shifts from black to a lighter sort of grey. The air feels like it's holding its breath, and so are you. A stillness sits on the longhouse, not just from sleep, but from a kind of mental frost that's begun to settle over everyone. You're starting to feel it. the grind. You trudge outside, boots crunching on hardened snow, eyes squinting against the reflection of light on white. It's not bright, exactly, just relentless, like living inside a bowl of cold porridge that someone forgot to season. The chores are the same as yesterday, and the day before: haul water, chop wood, feed animals, check supplies, haul water again. If you're lucky, nothing breaks. If you're unlucky, the well's frozen and you get to chip through 3 inches of ice with your bluntest axe. Monotony might be the hardest part of winter. It seeps in quietly, like a leak in the roof, barely noticeable until it's soaked everything. You start forgetting what day it is, what month it is, whether your sister told you that story yesterday or last week. So how do you cope? Well, first, competition. Vikings were notoriously competitive, even with themselves. That means today's firewood stacking. Oh, it's a contest now. You and your cousin stack log after log, muttering under your breath, checking height, balance, artistry. She wins, but only because your pile fell over when the sheep headbutted it. You accuse her of bribery via animal. She laughs and throws snow in your face. You throw some back. Suddenly you're rolling in the snow, laughing, shouting, half freezing, and somehow alive again. The grind is real, but so is the need to break it. Games, pranks, competitions, songs, storytelling, even flirting if you're bold enough to try winking at someone through 3 layers of wool and frostbitten eyelashes. Quirky. Fact. Some winter competitions involved skiing. Yes, skiing. The Vikings had wooden skis long before the Swiss got involved, and they even had a god Ulla associated with it. Whether they used them for hunting, racing, or just showing off, no one knows for sure. But somewhere deep in the fjords, people were definitely gliding over snow, yelling, "Watch this!" You try sliding on a frozen plank just for fun. You immediately fall, spectacularly. 2 kids see it, and now you're falling axe-butt for the rest of the week, which honestly is fair. Later, back inside, you see another form of coping with winter's sameness: crafting. Someone is carving an intricate design into the haft of a spear, not because it needs decoration, but because their hands need to do something. Another person's weaving thread into geometric bands that will trim a new tunic. The patterns are complex, loops within loops, swirls like waves, shapes that seem to move when you squint at them. Historians still argue about the purpose of Viking textile patterns. Were they symbolic, protective, purely decorative? Theories abound, but here in the Longhouse, they're survival, quiet, patient survival. You join in, find a scrap of wood, a dull knife, and start carving runes into its surface. Not to say anything specific, just to feel the motion. The scrape of blade against grain, the texture of the symbols taking shape. Your body relaxes, your mind untangles. Someone passes around a pot of warm broth. You sip slowly, feeling it fill the spaces in you that the cold tries to empty. It tastes like boiled everything with a hint of thyme, and you're grateful. You think about how long you've been snowed in. Weeks? Months? The last time you saw the sea feels like a dream. The sound of gulls, the crack of sails, the salt spray on your lips. It's hard to believe those things ever existed, but they did, and they will again. The elders say the grind means you're still alive, and that's true. The animals are fed, the children are warm, the fire hasn't gone out, no one has wandered into the woods and married a troll. Yet. You finish carving your runestick and hang it over your sleeping bench, a tiny act of rebellion against the sameness of days. A declaration: I was here, I endured. You settle in for the night as the fire crackles and people begin another round of quiet conversation and shared dreams. The snow outside falls like silence made visible. You tuck your hands under your furs and feel a small sense of peace. Winter tries to erase you, slowly, day by day, but you refuse. Not just by surviving, but by carving your name into it. The sun, if you can call it that, peeks shyly over the horizon for about 20 minutes today before it runs away again like it forgot something. You sit by the open door for a few moments, letting the faint golden glow warm your face. Well, psychologically at least. Physically, it still feels like licking a glacier. But that brief glimmer of light is enough to spark something inside you. Today, you're going outside. Properly. Beyond the fences, beyond the comfort of shared warmth and goat breath. It's hunting day. You bundle up with layers upon layers, 2 wool tunics, thick breeches, double-wrapped leg bindings, your squirrel-trimmed cloak. Yes, you've accepted that now. And the old leather boots stuffed with straw that make your feet smell like a barn snack. You strap a bow to your back, tuck a hand axe into your belt, and pocket a small leather pouch of dried meat and frozen barley bread, not because you're hungry now, but because you will be, always. The others join you. It's a small hunting party today. Too cold for large groups, and besides, there are only so many furs you can trade off each other before someone ends up in tears or frostbite. You step into the woods, and the quiet hits you like a heavy blanket. Snow muffles everything, your steps, the trees creaking, even your thoughts. It's peaceful in that eerie, slightly are we alone out here way. You walk in single file, breaking trail, eyes scanning for movement. Every crunch underfoot is a gamble. Could be just snow. Could be an ice-covered puddle waiting to humiliate you in front of your peers. It's a toss-up. The tracks you're looking for are faint. A few deer prints crossing a stream, a scatter of rabbit trails weaving through the underbrush. You stop, hold up a hand. Everyone freezes. In the distance, a rustle, then silence again. You crouch, knock an arrow, and listen with your whole body. Your breath curls into the air like smoke. Your fingers ache on the bowstring. There's movement. A deer. Small, quick. You aim. Exhale. Release. The arrow misses. It sails into a snowbank with the quiet dignity of a failed attempt, and the deer bolts like it's been told you forgot its birthday. Everyone sighs, but no one laughs, because that's how it goes. Hunting in winter isn't just difficult, it's brutal. Most animals are scarce. The smart ones are asleep, and you're stuck out here trying to trick nature into giving up calories when you're already down to your backup rations and dreams of salted pork. Still, you push on. Eventually someone does get lucky. A hare caught in a snare left from the day before. Scrawny, yes, but fresh meat. You say a quiet thanks, not to a specific god, but to the hare itself. Gratitude matters, superstition more so. You make a fire under a rocky overhang and roast the meat, slowly, carefully. The smell is rich and savoury, and it cuts through the cold like sunlight. Everyone leans close, holding frozen hands toward the heat, trying not to look too eager. You chew each bite like it's sacred, because it is. Quirky detail. Viking hunters sometimes used hawks to help flush out game. Imagine it. Your companion is a fierce bird with better vision than your whole family combined, trained to scare up prey. You glance at the sky, hoping one day you'll have your own feathered hunting buddy, or at least someone to carry your snacks. Historians still debate how often Vikings relied on wild game versus livestock and preserved goods. Some believe winter hunts were rare and symbolic, more about keeping skills sharp. Others argue that certain regions, especially inland settlements, depended heavily on trapping and hunting to survive. You believe in both theories, depending on how well the snares are working this week. On your way back to the Longhouse, your fingers numb and cheeks bright red, you spot something unusual. A fallen tree half covered in snow with strange patterns along the bark. You scrape it with your knife. Runes. Someone marked this long ago. Maybe a warning. Maybe a story. You don't read all of it. Just one familiar symbol. The rune for endurance. You smile. Back home, the Longhouse welcomes you with warmth, smoke, and the rich scent of stew. Everyone crowds around to hear about the hunt. The hare becomes a tale of cunning, heroism, and epic battle. By the end of the story, it was practically a wolf. Someone sharpens your arrow. Another tosses you a better pair of gloves. You eat, you thaw, you sleep. Tomorrow, the cold will return. The hunt will begin again, and you'll be ready. Because the forest may be vast and cruel and indifferent, but you've walked in it. You've faced it. And you've come back with something more than meat. You've come back with the proof that you're still fighting. You wake up to an eerie silence, the kind that makes you suspicious. No wind, no chickens, no grumbling from the next sleeping bench, just an unnatural stillness. You throw off your fur blanket and peek outside, and there it is. Snow. So much snow. Not the usual overnight sprinkle. No, this is the you step outside and disappear up to your waist kind. The Longhouse door won't even open all the way. It pushes into a wall of white like the gods dumped a glacier on your porch. Congratulations, you're snowed in. Back inside, the mood is testy. People are whispering in that slow, strained tone, usually reserved for livestock injuries and missing stew spoons. Someone mentions a story about the winter of endless snow, a whole month where nobody left the house, and the pigs learned to climb ladders out of boredom. You hope that's a joke. With the main path blocked and visibility outside near zero, no one's going hunting or hauling water. And this means one thing: emergency winter mode. First up, ration check. You and a few others dig into the cellar storage. It's a low, dark, cramped space under the floorboards, and it smells like turnips and desperation. You take inventory. Dried fish, a lot. Hard cheese, mouldy but edible. Barley, 2 whole sacks of onions, and, oh yes, the black bread. Here's a quirky fact. Vikings may have played an early version of chess called Hnefatafel, a strategy game where one side defends a king while the other tries to capture him. It's not symmetrical, not balanced, and deeply frustrating, which makes it perfect for snow days. Someone pulls out a set of carved walrus ivory pieces shaped like warriors and shields. You join the game and promptly get crushed by a child. Twice. You question your self-worth, then eat more black bread. Still, there's comfort in routine. Water's boiled from snow. Cloaks are hung by the fire to dry. Someone starts spinning wool with a drop spindle, twisting the thread with practiced fingers. Another mends a fur hood with fine bone needles. You learn that when stuck inside, motion is survival, not just physically, but mentally. So you join in, help scrape dried fish skin into thread, practice basic embroidery, badly, recarve the spoon you didn't really need. The point is, you're doing something. Historians still argue whether snow-inns like this were common in Viking settlements or more of a Highland or Northern issue. But sagas and household artifacts suggest people were prepared. They had patterns, habits, rituals, even if that ritual was just finding new ways to insult each other politely. The snow doesn't let up for 2 more days, and by then, you've gone slightly weird. You've named the bread loaves, you've braided your hair into patterns that resemble swan wings, you've written a dramatic poem about a spoon's tragic journey to the floor and back. People start clapping every time someone manages to not spill stew. But here's the thing, you're still okay. No one has panicked. The fire's burning, the food's holding out. You're learning, in real time, that Viking survival isn't about brute strength, it's about resilience, about knowing when to laugh, when to listen, and when to just quietly hold it together. Eventually, the wind drops. You force open the door. Outside, the world is white and endless and full of sharp air. But the sky is clear. The storm has passed. Everyone steps out slowly, blinking at the light, feeling the stillness like a gift instead of a threat. You look back at the Longhouse, smoke rising, laughter echoing, someone still eating onion like it's dessert, and you know something for certain. You're not just surviving winter, you're mastering it. You're standing in front of the river, or rather what used to be a river. Right now, it's a giant frozen slab of opaque white and faded blue, stretching out between snow-blanketed banks like a glass road to nowhere. It doesn't move. It doesn't even sound like water. It looks like time has stopped mid-flow and just decided to wait until April. You tap your foot against it, carefully, then again, solid, for now. That's the rule of winter rivers. Trust, but test, because under that flat, sleepy surface, the current still runs deep, black, and absolutely eager to eat you if you misstep. Still, you're here for a reason. You're helping cut ice blocks today. See, winter didn't just bring hardship, it also brought opportunity, and Vikings were nothing if not opportunistic. With the river frozen, it became both obstacle and tool. You could cross where boats never could. You could store water in solid form. You could even harvest the ice, a primitive, chilling version of refrigeration before refrigerators were cool. Pun fully intended. Someone nearby is chipping at the surface with a heavy iron axe, rhythmically slicing a rectangular outline into the ice. You take your turn, the blade biting deep with each strike, sending up little shards that sting your cheeks like snowflakes with anger issues. Eventually you help lift a massive block free with ropes and wooden poles. It glistens in the pale light, translucent and humming with stored cold. You drag it back to the storage pit near the Longhouse, where it'll be packed with straw and buried. Come spring, it might still be there, ready to cool milk or beer or soothe an injury, assuming nobody steals it first for a very dramatic snowball fight. Historians still argue whether Vikings used harvested ice this way routinely or only in exceptional circumstances. There's little hard evidence, but oral traditions suggest they knew exactly how to manipulate their frozen environment when necessary. But you're not done with the river just yet. As afternoon light slants across the horizon, red, it gets slightly less grey, someone pulls out a sled. Now, this isn't your modern plastic neon-coloured hill-shooting speedster. This is a flat plank with runners made from split birch and fastened with leather ties, possibly carved with a spiral design if someone was feeling fancy. It's not built for fun, but for function, which in Viking terms means it can be fun if you try hard enough. You attach the sled to a reindeer, or in your case, to 4 bored goats. Because this is what happens when you're snowed in too long, you get ideas. The child hops on the sled and with a loud "Hiya!" that no goat respects, you begin what can only be described as a very slow chase scene. The goats shuffle, the sled creaks, the child howls with laughter. You follow, dragging your feet to help steer. It's barely faster than walking, but in this landscape, barely is a luxury. You pass an elder who nods approvingly. You don't know if they're proud of the ingenuity or just happy to see the goats getting some exercise. As evening falls and your ice-hauling muscles start to protest, you take one last walk along the river's edge. The ice glows slightly under the sky, reflecting the pale light of the half-moon. You notice cracks, long, sinuous lines across the surface like a sleeping creature's scars. It reminds you that even when things look frozen solid, there's still movement underneath. A lesson that feels weirdly personal. You sit down on a smooth rock and chew a strip of dried reindeer meat that tastes like salty leather. Around you, the world hums in silence. You watch your breath float up like smoke. It's peaceful, hypnotic, cold in a way that feels spiritual. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Norse poems describe winter not just as a season, but as a being. An old man with a frost beard. A spirit that walks the land in silence, touching windows with white fingers. You think of that now and wonder if he's watching you sit there, daring him to come closer. Eventually, you head back. The goats are curled up in the hay. The ice blocks are packed away. The longhouse glows warmly in the distance, a little wooden sun in a snowy universe. You step inside and instantly feel your skin sigh in relief. Someone hands you a bowl of hot broth. Another tosses you a dry tunic. There's laughter around the fire. You realise your hands are sore, your feet are damp, and your back is going to curse you tomorrow. But you've worked with winter today, not just against it. You've pulled strength from the ice, glided over danger, built memory into the frozen hours. And for the first time this week, you don't feel like a prisoner in your own season. You feel like a partner. You've just finished fixing a broken door hinge using a strip of rawhide, a fishbone, and what may or may not have once been part of a comb. It's officially the most Viking repair job you've ever done, and for a brief moment you feel like the god of improvisation. But then comes the sound. A creak, a thud, a distinctly ominous groan. It's not the longhouse, it's underneath the longhouse. You pause. Everyone does. There's a shared glance, the kind that says, "Okay, who forgot to feed the cellar spirit again?" Turns out it's not a ghost. Just the storage pit roof buckling slightly under too much snow, which is, in its own way, just as terrifying. Winter isn't just about cold, it's about the weight of it all. Snow piling on roofs, ice creeping into wood joints, wind grinding everything into something a little more tired than the day before. So today becomes maintenance day. Not glamorous, not heroic, but absolutely critical. Because while Viking stories may celebrate warriors and gods, the unsung hero of every long winter was a sturdy roof that didn't cave in while you were trying to sleep. You're sent up first, naturally. You haul yourself onto the roof, boots sliding slightly, heart pounding with that familiar "please don't die doing chores" feeling. The snow is knee-deep up here. You start shoveling it off with a wide plank. Each scoop slides down the roof like an avalanche in miniature, smacking the ground with a dull whump. Below, someone yells, "Not on the goat!" You yell back an apology. Quirky note, some Viking houses had turf roofs, not just for insulation but also for durability. They were built like upside-down boats, curved beams, thick insulation, packed earth, and sometimes even living grass in summer. Of course, all that beauty becomes a nightmare in deep snow. Too much weight and the roof sags like old cheese. After 2 hours, you've cleared most of it. You're soaked with sweat and snow, your gloves are stiff, and you have straw in places you'd rather not discuss. But the house is safer, for now. Inside, the maintenance continues. Someone's resealing window gaps with wool scraps. Another is stitching up tears in a fur cloak. You're handed a splintered stool and a wooden peg and asked to make it sit again. You don't even question it anymore. You just start sanding. Historians believe that Viking longhouses were not only homes but also workshops, and winter turned every family into a repair crew. From woodworking to iron forging, spinning to tool mending, everyone had a job. And while you're not exactly a blacksmith, you do manage to wedge the stool back together with enough force and optimism that it sort of holds its shape. You test it with your weight. It creaks. You stand back up. Better to live another day. Someone sets about cleaning the hearthstone, not for hygiene, though yes, also that, but to reset the firebed and make sure embers don't burn through the floor. You scrape soot with a flat shell. Watch the way the ash dances upward like whispering ghosts. The work is slow, repetitive, oddly satisfying, and then the rope snaps. It's part of a pulley someone rigged to store smoked meat overhead. The meat comes tumbling down in a heap, followed by a shout of pure, operatic frustration. No injuries, except pride. You help tie a new knot, tighter this time, and with the rope restrung and the meat hoisted back up, someone raises a mug of thin ale and says, "To surviving stupid things before they kill us." You drink to that. Here's a curious detail. Viking knots weren't just functional, they were a form of art. Sailors in particular were famous for their knotting techniques. Some knots even had specific names and purposes, and mastering them was a rite of passage, even for young men. You wonder how many knots your hands have memorized without you even realizing it. As the day ends, you sit by the hearth, brushing the dust off your tunic and wiping grime from your palms. You feel sore in that deep, satisfying way that says, something stayed upright today because I was here. No one sings songs about roof repairs. No one writes sagas about stool legs or smoke vents. But you know the truth. Without these quiet triumphs, none of the loud ones could ever happen. You look up at the ceiling, the beams dry and straight, the stones holding strong, the meat rope still holding. You smile, just a little. Outside, the wind picks up again. Of course it does. But now, you've patched the walls, you've sealed the cracks, you've braced the bones of this place with your own hands. And winter, it can knock all it wants. This house, your house, isn't going anywhere. You wake up to the smell of something sweet. That's not a winter smell, that's a celebration smell. You sit up, rubbing the frost out of your eyelashes, and realize something strange. The Longhouse is buzzing. Not the usual mumbling and goat complaints. This is different. People are humming. Children are being brushed as if looking presentable matters. Someone just put on their best woolen tunic, the one with the red stitching. You whisper to the nearest person, "What's going on?" They grin. Hol. And just like that, it clicks. This isn't just another winter day. It's the Holblot, the Midwinter feast, the old Norse celebration of light, of endurance, of making it halfway through the darkness and not losing your mind, or at least not all of it. You scramble into your cleanest dirty clothes, even find your bone comb and give your beard or hair or both a quick swipe, because today isn't about chores. It's about reminding each other that joy still exists. You step outside and the snow is still everywhere, but it feels different. Maybe it's the way the low sunlight hits the icicles like glass daggers dipped in honey. Or maybe it's just the energy, the defiant warmth of people choosing laughter in the face of freeze. Back inside, preparations are in full swing. There's stew bubbling in the cauldron, real stew, with actual chunks of meat, not just turnips pretending to be something they're not. Flatbread is being baked on hot stones, and someone has found enough honey to drizzle on top. You stare at it like it's treasure. Because it is. Here's a quirky historical bit. The word Yule is the root of the modern word Yule. Before Christianity swept the north, this festival was about honouring ancestors, celebrating surviving the darkest nights, and feasting like you had something to prove. It was a big deal. Bonfires, offerings, toasts, and maybe a bit too much. Mead. You help hang a few decorations, pine branches, carved wooden symbols, even dyed cloth strips in red and blue. Someone ties little bells to a goat. No one questions it. The centerpiece of today's celebration, the toasts or minis, each one made to someone, living, dead god or goat that helped you survive this far. The first cup is raised to Odin for wisdom and endurance, the second to the ancestors, the third to those who made it through another frozen morning with all their toes intact. You raise your own mug and speak a name, your grandfather's maybe, or your mother's, or even the friend who once dared you to lick a frozen shield. It's not about eloquence, it's about meaning. The mead flows, the laughter rises, someone starts playing a lyre, badly but with heart. A few people start a dance that mostly looks like hopping in place with rhythm, but it works. The kids join in, spinning, slipping, giggling. Then come the gift exchanges. Now, don't expect gold rings or battle axes. These are winter gifts. Practical, humble, sometimes absurd. A carved spoon, a warm sock, a charm made from birch bark and wishful thinking. You're handed a tiny leather pouch of dried herbs. You don't ask what they're for, you just nod, like it's the greatest gift in Midgard. You offer someone a charm you made from that broken arrow and a strip of wool. They grin like you handed them Thor's hammer. That's how this works. Intention beats price, always. Historians still argue whether Jol was more religious or communal in spirit. Some say it was deeply sacred, an offering to the gods of light. Others say it was just about survival and keeping morale from hitting rock bottom. The truth is probably both. Because as the feast wears on and people start slumping by the fire, full and warm and just slightly buzzed, you see something beautiful. They're relaxed. They're laughing. They're remembering who they are. And you? You feel human again. Not just a walking collection of cold fingers and sleep deprivation, but a person. With a place, with a story. You look around. This longhouse, this family, these strange and stubborn survivors. This is your tribe, your saga. The fire pops, sending a spray of siste. Parks upward like stars trying to escape. You lean back, smile. Jol isn't about escaping winter. It's about facing it together, with food, fire, and maybe just enough mead to forget how cold your feet still are. The fire burns low tonight, the last logs glowing like dragon teeth beneath a soft bed of ash. You're lying on your side, listening to the quiet stirrings of the longhouse, the shuffling of feet as someone tucks in a sleeping child, the low murmur of two voices arguing gently over whether tomorrow is stew day or soup day, and the rhythmic sigh of a dog curled against the hearth. You've made it. Not through winter, not yet, but through the darkest, deepest part, the part where night never ends and food tastes like wood and time loses its grip. You survived the snowed-in days, the cold hunts, the brittle mornings and roof repairs and black bread and goat drama. Now comes the slow climb back towards spring. But before that you face one final challenge, restlessness. Because now that you're not constantly in fight or freeze mode, your mind has room to wander, to worry, to remember. You lie awake and think about the sea, about the ships sitting frozen in the fjord, their dragon heads frosted white, their hulls creaking softly in the shifting ice. You imagine the sailcloths folded tight, sleeping like the wings of some beast that hasn't flown in months. You miss the motion, the salt, the horizon that actually moves. Someone once said that winter is the test, not of strength but of spirit, and now you understand what they meant. Muscles heal, toes thaw, but the soul, that takes effort. So tonight you do what your people have always done. You tell a story, not out loud, everyone's sleeping, and the last thing you need is a groggy warrior throwing a boot at your head. But quietly, in your mind, a story of ships and storms and stars, of fjords and far lands, of gods and giants. And in the middle of it, someone a little like you, cold, tired, stubborn, who endures. You shape the tale like clay in your thoughts, fitting each piece together until it becomes real. You add Joes. Cares where you can, drama where you must, and a happy ending because, frankly, you deserve one. Quirky fact. Viking skalds, storytellers, often kept entire family sagas in their heads, memorized through rhythm and repetition. Some were passed down for generations before ever being carved into runes. The mind was a fireproof library. As you drift, you think about legacy, not in the grand way, no heroic death or song carved into stone, but in the quiet way. The roof you fixed, the bowl you carved, the warmth you shared, the laugh you gave someone when they needed it. Those are your runes. That's your saga. Historians still argue whether the average Viking cared about fame or simply wanted to stay fed and warm. You think maybe they cared about both, but only one could be salted and stored for later. Your breath slows. You feel the rhythm of the Longhouse breathing with you, a shared pulse in the dark. Outside, the wind has stilled. No more snow falls, and somewhere far off, the ice shifts with a hollow groan, as if the world itself is rolling over in its sleep. You smile. Because you know something now. Winter isn't just something you survive, it's something you become part of. Its silence becomes your silence. Its endurance, yours. You don't fight the cold, you adapt. You mould yourself into the shape of the season, rough edges, frozen fingers, and all. And when the thaw finally comes, when the rivers break and the sails rise again, you'll be ready. Because you didn't just wait it out, you lived in it. And that makes you stronger than any warrior with a sword. That makes you a Viking. Now, as the final embers glow and the Longhouse sleeps, let your breath soften. Let your muscles loosen from shoulders to fingertips, from hips to heels. There is nothing to do now. No firewood to stack, no roof to patch, no stew to stir. The night holds you gently, like a fur-lined blanket pulled snug across time itself. Listen to the hush, the silence that follows effort, the quiet that only arrives once the chores are done, and the laughter fades to memory. You've walked the snow-covered fields, felt the sting of wind and the warmth of fire. You've carved spoons, fixed stools, shared bread and stories. You've made it through the deepest dark, and now the light is returning, slowly, surely, just beyond the edge of sleep. If your thoughts drift, let them wander through frost-covered forests or sail across frozen seas. Let them glide past frozen rivers and snowed-in doors, through laughter around the hearth and whispered dreams beneath fur blankets. You're not alone in the long night. You are part of a village, warm, strong, stubborn, and tonight there is nothing left to prove. You've endured. That is enough, so close your eyes now. Let the snow fall, let the fire fade. You are safe. You are warm. You are home.